Life in my early years was a silent movie, played within the confines of a home that felt more like a fortress. My family, bound by strict norms that bordered on the extreme, watched my every move, every word, and every breath I took. It was a life of muted colors, where expressions were guarded, and spontaneity was a distant dream. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the first crack in that rigid world. She saw the life I was living and decided it was no life for a child. With a determination that matched her compassion, she pulled me out of that house when I was 13 and introduced me to a world where love wasn't just a whispered word but an everyday reality. Under her care, I blossomed. I traded silence for soft laughter, restrictions for freedom, and fear for love. But the shadows of my early years lingered, shaping me into a shy, modest young woman, whose comfort zone was the small, safe world I had built around myself. Web design became my chosen path, a career that allowed me to weave my creativity into the fabric of the digital world while staying within the protective walls of my home. My laptop was my window to the world, a world where I could be bold in my designs yet safeguarded from the direct gaze of society. On my 30th birthday, Grandma Eleanor decided it was time for me to meet someone, a thought that both thrilled and terrified me. Through her network, she found Ethan, a man just a few years my senior, known for his charm and seemingly gentle nature. Our first meeting was at a local diner, a place where the aroma of coffee and the buzz of quiet conversations created a comforting backdrop. Ethan walked in, his presence like a new chapter waiting to be written. "Lily, right? Your grandma's told me so much about you. Heard you're quite the artist with your web designs," Ethan said, his voice smooth, his smile easy. A blush crept up my cheeks, unaccustomed to such direct praise. "Thank you, Ethan. That's kind of you to say. And yes, design is my passion." As we talked, a connection began to form, gentle and tentative, like the first rays of sun after a long night. Ethan's words were like a balm, soothing the years of conditioned caution and reserve. "Lily, there's something about you. Your modesty, it's refreshing in this loud world. It's like discovering a quiet cove in a stormy sea," he said, his gaze holding mine with an intensity that stirred something deep within me. His words, so full of promise and understanding, touched a part of me that I had kept hidden, locked away from the world. "You know, Lily, I've always believed that true strength lies in being yourself, in a world that tries to make you like everyone else. I see that strength in you," Ethan continued, his voice sincere and warm. The days following that first meeting with Ethan were like stepping into a new world, one where the colors were brighter, and life felt more vivid. Our encounters were simple but meaningful, centered around long conversations over coffee, walks in the park, and shared laughter that seemed to echo long after we parted. One brisk afternoon, as we strolled through the park with leaves crunching under our feet, Ethan turned to me, his eyes shining with an idea. "Lily, you ever been to the old Wilson's farm? They've got this apple orchard, look straight out a postcard in the fall." I shook my head, a smile spreading across my face. "Can't say I have, Ethan. My adventures have been pretty limited to the digital world, you know?" He chuckled, a sound that warmed me from the inside out. "Well, guess it's about time we change that. What'd you say about going there this Saturday? They say there's nothing like picking apples on a crisp fall morning." And just like that, our quiet, comfortable routine expanded to include these little adventures. Each moment with Ethan felt like a step away from my old life, a life of restrictions and silence, into something more vibrant, more alive. The days turned into weeks, and the connection between us grew stronger, more profound. It wasn't just about shared interests or mutual attraction, it was about understanding, about finding someone who saw me for who I was and cherished that. One cool evening, as we sat on a bench watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan's voice broke the comfortable silence between us. "Lily, I've gotta tell you, these past weeks with you, they've been something else. You've got this quiet strength, this grace about you. It's rare, and it's beautiful," he said, his words wrapping around me like a warm blanket. His compliment caught me off guard, and I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. "Thank you, Ethan. I don't know what to say. You make it easy to be myself, to open up." He took my hand in his touch gentle yet firm. "That's all I ask, Lily. For you to be yourself. Because who you are is pretty amazing. I was thinking, maybe, just maybe, we can turn us into something more, something lasting." His words hung in the air, a question and a promise all at once. I looked into his eyes, seeing not just the man I had come to know and care for, but a future, a possibility of a life filled with laughter, understanding, and love. "I'd like that, Ethan. More than you know," I replied, my heart feeling lighter, more hopeful than it had in years. Life took a sharp turn when I moved in with Ethan and his mother, Mrs. Clayton. The house, which I had imagined would be a sanctuary of love and warmth, quickly revealed itself as a battleground of expectations and criticism. It was on the first morning in my new home that Mrs. Clayton laid down the law. I was in the kitchen, trying to make a good impression by preparing breakfast, when she walked in, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Lily, let's get one thing straight. You're part of this family now, and in this house, we have rules. You're gonna take care of the cooking and the cleaning. Got it?" Her voice was sharp, leaving no room for protest. Taken aback, I could only nod. "Yes, Mrs. Clayton. I understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes narrowed as she inspected the kitchen. "And I expect things to be done right. I run a tight ship here. No slacking." With that, she left the room, leaving me to absorb the reality of my new life. Each day became a relentless cycle of household chores. I'd wake up early, cook breakfast, then clean, then work on my web design projects, and then cook again. It was as if my entire existence had been reduced to serving the needs of the house. Ethan, whom I had thought to be my partner and protector, seemed oblivious to the strain I was under. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I decided to voice my concerns. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something," I started, my hands nervously twisting the dish towel. He looked up from his laptop, his expression one of mild annoyance. "What's up, Lily?" "It's about your mom, and the housework. It's a lot. And I feel like it's all on me," I said, the words spilling out in a rush. Ethan's eyes went back to his screen as he shrugged. "Well, yeah. Mom's set in her ways. It's just how things are done here. You'll get used to it." "But, Ethan, it's not fair. It's not right. I'm working too, and I have my own life. I'm not just here to cook and clean," I protested, feeling a spark of defiance ignite within me. Ethan sighed, a sound of exasperation. "Lily, don't make a big deal out of this. Mom's the boss of the house. Just try to keep her happy, okay?" His words felt like a slap, a stark reminder that my feelings, my exhaustion, were of little consequence in this household. The web of control in the Clayton household tightened its grip around me as the days passed. It wasn't just about the cooking and cleaning anymore. My modest earnings from web design, which I had cherished as my own, became the next target in the Clayton family's playbook of dominance. It was a typical evening. I was sitting at the dining table, finalizing a project on my laptop, when Ethan and Mrs. Clayton cornered me with a conversation I wasn't prepared for. "Lily, we need to talk about your work," Ethan started, his tone serious. I looked up, puzzled. "My work? What about it?" Mrs. Clayton interjected, her voice sharp and commanding. "Your money, dear. It's time you start contributing to the household. You live here, after all." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "But I do contribute, Mrs. Clayton. I take care of the house, the meals." Ethan cut me off. "That's not enough, Lily. We're talking about financial contribution. Your earnings should be going into the family account. It's only fair. The unfairness of it all hit me like a wave. But that's my money, Ethan. I earn it. I have my own expenses, my own needs. Mrs. Clayton scoffed. Needs? What needs could you possibly have that are more important than this family? No, dear, your place is to support this household, just like we support you. Ethan nodded in agreement, his eyes void of the understanding and warmth they once held. It's decided then. From now on, your earnings go to the family account. I'll take care of the finances. I felt cornered, trapped. The little financial independence I had was being stripped away, leaving me more vulnerable than ever. But Ethan, this isn't right. It's not fair. I should have a say in how my money is used. He shrugged, a cold, dismissive gesture that sent shivers down my spine. Fair? Life's not fair, Lily. You're part of this family now, and this is how things work here. Mrs. Clayton's eyes bore into me, ensuring her message was loud and clear. You'll thank us later, dear. We're teaching you how to be part of a family, how to be a proper wife. As they left me there, alone with my racing thoughts, the reality of my situation became painfully clear. My income, my hard-earned money, was now under their control. Trapped in the Clayton household, my life had become a never-ending cycle of servitude. The financial control Ethan and his mother exerted over me was suffocating. My earnings, once a source of independence, were now tightly gripped in their hands. The situation was unbearable, yet I felt powerless to change it. One day, I decided to seek solace in the one place I always felt understood, the web design forum. Typing away on my laptop, I poured my heart out to Sarah, a fellow designer I had befriended online. Sarah, I'm in a bad place. Ethan and his mom, they're controlling everything, even my earnings. I don't know what to do, I typed, the words on the screen blurring through my tears. Almost instantly, Sarah's reply popped up. Lily, that's not right. They're manipulating you. That's financial abuse, you know. Her words were a jolt of reality. Abuse? I typed back, the word feeling foreign yet painfully accurate. Yes, abuse. Lily, you need to protect yourself. Read up on psychological abuse and financial control. Knowledge is power, Sarah urged. Taking her advice to heart, I started reading. Books on psychology, articles on financial abuse, stories of people who had walked the path I was on. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. Ethan and Mrs. Clayton weren't just overbearing, they were abusers, using manipulation and control to keep me under their thumb. One evening, as I was absorbed in a book on psychological growth, Mrs. Clayton barged into my room, her eyes scanning the title in my hands. What's this nonsense you're reading, Lily? She demanded, her voice dripping with disdain. It's a book on personal growth, Mrs. Clayton, I replied, a newfound strength in my voice. She snorted, personal growth? Don't fill your head with such rubbish. Your place is here, taking care of this family, not reading silly books. But her words, which would have once sent me into a spiral of self-doubt, now bounced off me. I had begun to see through their game, to understand the dynamics of control and abuse. Ethan, your mother thinks my reading is rubbish, I said later that evening, hoping to find an ally in him. Ethan, however, was far from supportive. Mom's right, Lily. You're getting ideas above your station. Focus on your duties here. That's what's important. His words were a crushing blow, yet they only fueled my determination. It was clear now, I was alone in this fight. But I was no longer the timid, compliant Lily they thought they knew. The knowledge I had armed myself with was my weapon, and I was ready to use it. Life at the Claytons had pushed me to my limits. I had been enduring, silently suffering under the weight of their control and manipulation. But everything changed the day fate intervened in the most unexpected way. It was a regular morning, and I was out running errands, lost in my thoughts, when suddenly, out of nowhere, a car came speeding around the corner. Before I could react, everything went black. I woke up in a sterile hospital room, my body aching and my mind foggy. As my vision cleared, I saw Ethan and Mrs. Clayton standing by my bedside. But their expressions weren't of concern or worry, they were of irritation and anger. "Lily, what were you thinking, wandering around like that? Do you have any idea how inconvenient this is for us?" Ethan's voice was harsh, void of any warmth. Mrs. Clayton chimed in, her words sharp and cold. "Yes, and now who's going to take care of the house, the cooking, the cleaning? You've put us in quite a bind, Lily." I lay there, stunned, not by the pain from my injuries, but by the sheer lack of empathy from the people I had been living with. I'm sorry," I managed to whisper, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Ethan's face twisted into a scowl. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Lily. We need you back on your feet, taking care of your responsibilities. This little stunt of yours is unacceptable." Mrs. Clayton nodded in agreement, her eyes scanning me with disdain. "Absolutely. And once you're back, we expect you to make up for the lost time. No slacking." Their words, their complete disregard for my well-being, lit a fire within me. It was the turning point, the moment I realized that I was nothing more than a convenience to them, a tool to be used and discarded at will. "Enough," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm not your maid, not your cook, not your ATM. I'm a human being, and I deserve respect, care, and empathy, none of which you've shown." Ethan's eyes widened in shock, clearly not expecting resistance. "Lily, you're not thinking straight. You need to calm down and think about your duties, your place in this family." But I was done. Done with being told my place, done with being treated like a nobody. "My place," I said, my voice steady, "is not here, not with you. I deserve better, and I will have better." The doctor walked in at that moment, breaking the tension. He explained my injuries, the fractures, and the long road to recovery. Ethan and Mrs. Clayton's faces fell as they realized the implications, the weeks of convalescence, the medical expenses, and the absence of their obedient housekeeper. Ethan, his voice laced with frustration, turned to me. "If you think you're going to sit back and enjoy a vacation at our expense, you're mistaken. If you're not back on your feet and fulfilling your duties in a month, consider this marriage over." For the first time, his threat didn't scare me, it liberated me. "Ethan," I said, a smile tugging at the corners of my bruised lips, "I'm ready for that divorce. It's the best news I've heard in months." Their shocked faces were the last things I saw before they stormed out of the room. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized the crash hadn't just broken my bones, it had shattered the chains that bound me. A couple of days after Ethan and Mrs. Clayton's disastrous visit, a nurse wheeled in a small cart with my personal belongings, a bag that Ethan had left for me. Among the items was my laptop, my gateway to the world and, more importantly, to my independence. As I slowly, painfully opened the laptop, the screen welcomed me like an old friend. I was about to embark on the most crucial project of my life, my liberation. I began by drafting an email to my lawyer, detailing the years of financial control, emotional manipulation, and the recent threats from Ethan and his mother. My fingers trembled, but with each word typed, I felt stronger, more in control. A few days later, Ethan came to visit, his demeanor a mix of anger and disbelief. "Lily, what's this nonsense about a lawyer? You think you can take me on?" he scoffed, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. I looked at him, my resolve unwavering. "It's not nonsense, Ethan. It's the truth. I'm done being your puppet. I'm taking back my life, my money, my dignity." He laughed, a cold, harsh sound. You? You don't have the guts. You're nothing without me, without us." But I wasn't the old Lily anymore. "Watch me, Ethan. You and your mother have controlled and used me for long enough. Those days are over. His face reddened, a vein throbbing in his neck. You'll regret this, Lily. You'll come crawling back. I shook my head, a small smile playing on my lips. I'd rather crawl through fire than come back to you. After Ethan stormed out, the days blended into weeks. My body was healing, but more importantly, my spirit was healing too. I spent hours reading, learning, and preparing for the battle ahead. The hospital room, once a symbol of my vulnerability, had become my war room. The day I was discharged from the hospital marked the beginning of my new life. Grandma Eleanor, frail but with a spirit as strong as ever, was by my side as I walked out of the hospital. Her eyes, filled with tears of pride and relief, told me all I needed to know. I was on the right path. Grandma, I'm scared, but I'm ready, I told her, my voice steady. She squeezed my hand. I know, my dear. And you're not alone. We're in this together. The journey back to Grandma Eleanor's house was quiet, but it was a silence filled with determination and hope. The old Lily was gone, and in her place stood a woman ready to reclaim her life, one step at a time. The morning of the hearing, Grandma Eleanor and I sat at the kitchen table, a silent understanding between us. Lily, you ready for this? She asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. I nodded, feeling a surge of strength from her unwavering support. I am, Grandma. It's time to put an end to this, once and for all. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Ethan and Mrs. Clayton were already there, their faces a mask of arrogance and disbelief. They still couldn't fathom that the once submissive Lily was challenging them. As we walked past them, Ethan's voice, cold and mocking, reached my ears. You really think you can win this, Lily? You're just a nobody. I stopped, turning to face him, my gaze unflinching. I am somebody, Ethan. And today, you'll see just how much you underestimated me. The court proceedings were a blur, with testimonies given and evidence presented. My lawyer was a pillar of strength, laying out the years of financial and emotional abuse with precision and clarity. Ethan and Mrs. Clayton's lawyer tried to discredit me, painting me as an ungrateful wife. But the recordings I had made, the meticulous records of their controlling behavior, and the financial statements spoke louder than their lies. As the judge pronounced the verdict, favoring me and granting significant compensation, the look of shock and defeat on Ethan and Mrs. Clayton's faces was a sight I would never forget. Outside the courthouse, Ethan approached, his demeanor now that of a defeated man. Lily, please, let's talk about this. We can settle it without the compensation. You don't have to do this. I looked at him, the man I once believed would protect me, now a mere shadow of his former self. No, Ethan. You had your chance. You chose to control and abuse instead of love and respect. This is the consequence of your actions. Mrs. Clayton, her pride shattered, joined in, her voice trembling. Lily, please, I'm an old woman. Have some mercy. I shook my head, the final pieces of the emotional shackles they had bound me with falling away. Mercy was what I begged for when you controlled every aspect of my life, Mrs. Clayton. It's too late for that now. As Grandma Eleanor and I walked away, the weight of years of oppression lifting off my shoulders, I knew that this was more than just a legal victory. It was the triumph of justice, the affirmation of my strength, and the beginning of a new chapter. But the story didn't end there. News of Ethan's and Mrs. Clayton's actions spread, reaching Ethan's workplace. His colleagues started looking at him differently, whispers followed him around, and soon, his position at work was demoted. He was a shadow of his former self, condemned and despised for his actions. Mrs. Clayton faced her own downfall. She found herself ostracized, her name synonymous with manipulation and cruelty. Decent society closed its doors on her, her past actions casting a long shadow over her present. As for me, life was opening new doors. It was a chance to start fresh, to build a life on my terms. The battle was tough, but it led to a new beginning, a future where I was no longer a victim, but the author of my own story. The final reckoning was not just an end, but a promise of a new, brighter dawn.
You think you can trust family to have your back, but what happens when they're the ones holding the knife? Those words rang hollow in my mind as I stared numbly at the incriminating photos strewn across my desk. Pictures of my younger sister Alina and my boyfriend Jamie, intimate moments captured that shattered my world into pieces. "How could you do this to me?" I asked hoarsely, tears streaming down my cheeks as Jamie shifted uncomfortably in front of me. Alina simply smirked. "Did you really think he could ever be fully satisfied with someone as dull and boring as you, sis? Jamie deserves excitement in his life, something you've never been able to provide." The venom in her words stung, made worse by Jamie's refusal to meet my eyes. My creative passion as a graphic designer used to energize him, or so I thought. But Alina's magnetic charm had clearly seduced him. I was 28 years old, established in my career, and thinking I had the perfect life in our big city. Meanwhile, Alina at 24 had always seethed with jealousy at my accomplishments, masking it behind a dazzling smile. "This has to stop right now," I stated firmly, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Jamie, we're through. And you, Alina, get out of my apartment. I never want to see your face again." Jamie opened his mouth but seemed to think better of it. Without a word, he turned and left, the slamming door an exclamation point on our now shattered relationship. Alina just laughed derisively. "Oh, Brenna, always trying to be the principled one. Without me, you'd be completely alone in this world. Deep down, you know you need me more than I need you." I looked at her with a mix of heartbreak and disgust. This was my own flesh and blood, someone who was supposed to have my back. But her callous betrayal cut deeper than any wound. Grabbing my purse, I pushed past her towards the exit. "I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. Don't be there when I get back tomorrow to collect my things." "Running away again?" she taunted. "Just like when we were kids." I tuned out her voice, her toxic words no longer able to draw a reaction. My life as I knew it lay in ruins, but I would rebuild from the ashes. Starting now, Alina was dead to me. The next day, I returned to an empty apartment, just as I had demanded. As I packed my belongings, Jamie's discarded shirts and Alina's makeup stained the space that was once my sanctuary. I knew in that moment nothing would be the same. But at least one truth had been unveiled. The person I should have been able to trust above all others was the blade that cut deepest. With my life in boxes, I left behind the ruins of my past. Where I was headed, I didn't know. But any path away from Alina's deceit and the memory of Jamie's ultimate betrayal was the right direction. Blood might be thicker than water, but for me, the blood between sisters had been irreparably poisoned. It was time to start over and rebuild myself from this broken state. It had been 3 months since I left behind the wreckage of my life in that city. The stabbing pain had subsided into a dull ache, but I couldn't shake the bitter taste of betrayal from my mouth. I had settled into a cozy studio apartment and secured a freelance graphic design gig to keep me afloat. At least work provided a temporary escape from dwelling on Alina's treachery and Jamie's unfaithfulness. Then one evening my phone rang with an eerily familiar number. Against my better judgment, I answered tentatively. "Hello? Brenna?" My traitorous sister's sickly sweet voice oozed through the line. "It's me, Alina. I've been trying to reach you." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want? I have nothing left to say to you." "Please, you have to hear me out," she pleaded, her tone dripping with feigned remorse. "Jamie was just a horrible mistake. I've realized how much I need my big sister in my life." I scoffed at her audacity. "You stabbed me in the back and stole my boyfriend, all because you were jealous of my life. Why should I believe a word you say?" There was a pause, and then a sniffle, like she was choking back tears. "You're right. I was spiteful and cruel. I was so envious of what you had achieved that I tried to take it for myself. I've hit rock bottom, Brenna. I have nowhere else to turn." The remorseful act was almost convincing, but then I remembered the smug satisfaction on her face as she revealed the sordid affair. "Save your crocodile tears," I snapped. "You chose to betray me, and now you have to live with the consequences." Don't contact me again. I went to hang up, but her panicked voice burst through. Wait, I'm pregnant, and the baby is Jamie's. Those words landed like a sucker punch to the gut. I drew in a shaky breath, my mind spinning. You're lying, I managed weakly. This is just another one of your manipulative games. I swear on Mom and Dad's graves, she said, deadly serious now. I need your support, Brenna. You're all I have left in this world. Please. Part of me inwardly recoiled at the thought of offering any help to the person who decimated my life. But another part, the hapless sister deep within, wanted to believe there was still a shred of redeemable humanity in Alina. If what you're saying is true, I said carefully, then you're going to need somewhere to stay and some help getting on your feet for the baby's sake. Not for you. Never for you again. Thank you, she gushed, the relief palpable in her voice. I'll make the arrangements right away to come stay with you. You won't regret this, I promise. I doubted those words, but I'd take solace in being able to keep my unforgivable sister at a distance while ensuring her child didn't suffer for her sins. As I hung up, an uneasy knot twisted in my gut. Deep down, I feared that allowing Alina back into my world, even peripherally, was a recipe for future disaster. But I owed it to that innocent baby to try to rein in its conniving mother. If she burned me again, there would be no more second chances. The bridge would be burned for good this time. Only then would I be free from the heavy burden of the sister I once loved, but now loathed. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Alina stay with me until she got back on her feet. 3 days later, there was a knocking at my door. I steeled myself and pulled it open to see Alina standing there, her bump clearly visible beneath a tight maternity dress. She brushed past me without a word, suitcases in tow. I've converted the den into a little nursery area for you, I said stiffly. The couch pulls out to a bed. Alina shrugged as she dropped her bags. I guess this place will have to do for now. Her dismissive tone immediately put me on edge. Over the next few weeks, the tension was suffocating. Alina insisted on having friends over frequently to my tiny apartment, drinking wine and gossiping loudly while I tried to get work done. I felt like an intruder in my own home. One evening, I finally snapped as a raucous group spilled out of the den, clouds of smoke entering my bedroom. Get these people out of my apartment now! I barked at Alina, who was cradling her belly as she took a long drag from a cigarette. She feigned an innocent look. We're just having a little fun, Brenna. You need to learn to lighten up. That smug, infuriating look on her face, it was too much. I had dealt with her endless insults and violations of my boundaries, all for the sake of that unborn child. But enough was enough. Get out, I said, struggling to contain the rage boiling inside me. I should have never let you back into my life. Alina sneered, stabbing her cigarette into an ashtray. What? You'll throw a pregnant woman out on the streets? That's low, even for you. Her friends murmured in shock, already painting me as the villain in this encounter they had witnessed. After everything you've done to me? I fired back, tears welling in my eyes. You have the audacity to take zero accountability and act like the victim here? I turned away before letting my fury erupt and rushed out the door, needing to escape. I ended up holed up in a dingy 24-hour diner, sipping stale coffee, and wondering where my life went so horribly astray. I realized with sinking certainty that no matter how much I gave to appeasing Alina, she would never reciprocate. She was a remorseless black hole who only took and took until there was nothing left to give. I was tired of being the source that fed her insatiable need to manipulate. By the time I finally returned home near dawn, the apartment was blessedly silent, but it hardly felt like home any longer. In the end, Alina had gotten what she wanted. My sanctuary had been utterly defiled. I spent the next several days dodging Alina completely by burying myself in work and heading to the office to avoid her chaos. Then one day, I got a notification that I had been evicted from my apartment due to the constant partying and noise complaints. When I confronted Alina, she played dumb. You know how wild my friends can get sometimes. I tried to keep it under control, I swear. She had undermined me once again, this time destroying my living situation through neglect and irresponsibility. Alina had won, confident that I would never actually make her leave as her due date grew closer. But the isolation and despair of losing my home validated what I already knew. I was better off alone than continuously being tormented by my own sister's venom. With nothing left to lose, it became startlingly clear what I had to do next. I would make Alina pay dearly for her multitude of sins against me. Once and for all, she needed to atone for the trail of misery she had unleashed. An idea began formulating in my mind, a deliciously devious plan to strip away that smug facade and make her feel the ultimate consequences. Revenge would be mine. After being evicted from my apartment, I had no choice but to crash with a friend while I got back on my feet. Alina had found a place to stay as well, though I made it clear I wanted zero contact with her unless it involved the baby. A few weeks later, I was interviewing for a graphic design role at a small agency. My previous work had them practically drooling to bring me aboard. As I waited in the lobby, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp suit entered and gave me a warm smile. "You must be Brenna. I'm Cole, one of the lawyers who works with the agency on contracts and whatnot." I shook his outstretched hand, immediately comforted by his confident yet gentle demeanor. There was a kindness and integrity to his eyes that I hadn't encountered in a long time. After nailing the interview, I was offered the job on the spot. As I excitedly relayed the news to Cole, he flashed that smile again. "In that case, you'll have to let me take you out for celebratory drinks tonight, my treat." I'll admit, I was taken aback by his forwardness. But after everything with Alina and that snake Jamie, it was also refreshing to be direct and let intentions be known instead of dealing with mind games. "You know what? I'd like that," I replied with a sly grin. We ended up in a dive bar trading stories from our checkered pasts, with Cole being surprisingly open about overcoming a gambling addiction in his 20s. For my part, I gave him the carefully redacted version of my tale, avoiding any mention of Alina's treachery. "Sounds like this ex of yours really put you through the ringer," he observed after I danced around the details. "I'm just glad I was able to get my life on track before anything too disastrous happened." Something about Cole's soothing presence and words of encouragement left me longing to finally unburden the full truth I had been carrying alone for months. So many times Alina had weaponized her fake tears and pleas for support, manipulating me into offering misplaced empathy. But gazing into Cole's earnest eyes, I sensed I could finally confront those demons head-on without fear of exploitation. He just seemed to exude trustworthiness from every pore. "There's more to the story," I admitted, taking a stealing breath. "One that's eaten me up inside for longer than I can stand." Cole leaned in attentively as I relayed the foul details. Alina's despicable seduction of Jamie, her callous reveal of their affair, the psychological torment she inflicted repeatedly under the guise of needing family. With each agonizing confession, I could feel the weight of shame and anger releasing from my body. To his immense credit, Cole didn't once interrupt or judge. He simply listened, letting me purge those toxic burdens into the space between us. When I finally reached the end, tears streamed freely down my cheeks. Cole reached his hand across the table and clasped mine firmly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all that," he said with quiet compassion. "Your sister, she sounds like a truly terrible person." I let out a shuddering breath, clinging to his steadying grip. "The worst part is, she keeps finding new ways to haunt me and make me miserable. I want to move on, but she won't let me." Cole's expression hardened as he gave a slow nod. "Then we need to make sure she can never hurt you again." Those 9 words were like a balm to my wounded spirit. For once, it wasn't just me against the cruel machinations of my own flesh and blood. I had an ally. As our eyes locked, I realized Cole was the asset I needed to finally, permanently put Alina in her place once and for all. No more toying with my life. No more toxic manipulations enabled by misguided family loyalty. It was time to stop being the victim and take control. Alina wanted to see the dark side. She was about to get her reign of terror paid back to her in spades. Over the next few weeks, Cole and I began hatching an intricate plan to bring Alina's misdeeds to light. I filled him in on all the sordid details and depraved acts she had committed, stoking the fires of his protective anger. "She needs to pay for what she's done," Cole stated firmly one evening over strategy meeting beers. "Exploiting family ties and decimating your life like that is unforgivable." I nodded fervently. Alina's twisted actions had cost me my home, my relationship, my peace of mind. all because of her jealousy and depravity. I want to expose her lies and make her suffer the consequences, I declared, tempering the vengeful ire burning in my heart. But I also want to do it in a way where she can never play the victim again. Cole leaned back, pensively stroking the stubble on his chiseled jaw as he processed my words. You're talking about giving her enough figurative rope to hang herself, he said at last. Getting her overconfident, poisonous fangs to extend so we can restrain them for good. A slow smile stretched across my face. Leave it to the lawyer to articulate the strategy so perfectly. Exactly. We need to make her slip up and reveal her true vile nature publicly, removing any plausible deniability. And I know just the event that would make the perfect stage, Cole replied with a wolfish grin. A few days later, I was seated across from Alina at a luncheonette near her place. Her belly was massively swollen. The insufferable brat would be dropping that kid any day now. You wanted to meet? She regarded me with patent disinterest as she idly stirred her iced tea. This better be good. Being on my feet is so taxing lately. I fought to keep my expression neutral as I produced a glossy invitation embossed with an award ceremony logo. You remember that big design gala I attended last year? The one that effectively launched my career? Alina's eyes narrowed as she caught the distinct whiff of professionalism and prestige. Her mouth began watering like a predator detecting vulnerability. Of course, she replied coolly, adding a demeaning hair toss for good measure. The only real success you've ever had in this industry. Hook, line and sinker. Well, this year they've asked me to not only attend the VIP reception, but present my latest branding concepts to the entire convention hall. I made sure to state the words slowly and clearly to amplify their impact. I see, Alina responded, her veneer of indifference cracking slightly as envy glinted behind her eyes. That's a rather prestigious honor. Which is why I'd love for my family to be there supporting me, I continued in a sugary sweet tone. You and Jamie should both come as my special guests. It'll be a magical evening I want to share with the people I care about most. The blatant exclusion of Mom and Dad did not go unnoticed, based on the way Alina bristled. But her lust for the opulent gala overpowered any immediate objections. I suppose Jamie and I could grace your little convention with our presence, she huffed airily. After everything we've been through, the least you can do is dedicate your career highlight to making it up to us. I smiled inside at those words and her telling choice of the possessive pronoun, us. As if Jamie was still her depraved courtier, the infatuated ex who had turned his back on me for Alina's talons. It's a date, then, I replied in sugary tones. I'll have the +1 tickets waiting for you both under guest of honor. Alina was practically glowing, already envisioning herself lapping up accolades by merely being adjacent to my achievement. How deliciously, naively misguided she would prove to be. As I turned to leave, I allowed myself one parting remark that hinted at the reckoning to come. This night will be one you never forget, sis. She had no idea just how prophetic and ominous those words would be. The design gala ceremony was destined to be Alina's denouement, the unraveling of her conniving character before the very audience she so desperately craved. Let the games begin. The night of the gala finally arrived. Cole and I had been meticulously planning and preparing every detail for weeks. As I put the finishing touches on my show-stopping design presentation, he arrived at my place looking dapper in a tailored tuxedo. You about ready to go and destroy your sister? He asked with an excited glint in his eye. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. It's time for Alina's deception to finally catch up with her. When we arrived at the lushly decorated venue, Alina and Jamie were waiting by the VIP entrance, resplendent in formal attire. Her belly seemed obscenely inflated under the sleek maternity gown she wore. Don't you two look like manned Mrs. High Society, I remarked with syrupy sweetness as they turned to face me. Jamie averted his gaze guiltily, but Alina simply rolled her eyes. Can't slum it too much for your precious career night, I suppose. Now, let's not start things off on the wrong foot, Cole smoothly interjected, placing a calming hand on my arm. We're all here to celebrate Brenna's incredible accomplishments. Ever the voice of reason, Alina purred, giving Cole an approving once-over. You simply must introduce me to all your eligible colleagues later. Actually, Alina, Cole is my... Partner, I replied firmly, squeezing his hand to emphasize the point. He'll be by my side all evening. The tiniest flicker of disappointment passed over her features before that trademark predatory grin resurfaced. How progressive of you, sis. I always suspected you batted for the other team. Cole cleared his throat uncomfortably as the double meaning hung in the air. Well, shall we make our way inside? I believe the presentations are due to start shortly. We made our way through the grandiose double doors and took our seats near the front of the elaborately decorated auditorium. The energy among the assembled crowd was electric, with chatter and clinking glasses. I could feel Alina beside me seething with anticipation. After an opening speech from the host committee, it was finally time for my design presentation. I rose from my seat amidst warm applause and made my way to the stage, lectern before me. The crowd immediately hushed in rapt attention. Taking a fortifying breath, I launched into my presentation slides, a highly stylized branding concept for a new luxury resort. Each intricate graphic and color palette earned murmurs of approval from the audience. Thank you all for such a wonderful reception to my work, I said as the final slide displayed. I'm truly humbled and inspired to be among such talented peers in this creative field. Alina shifted impatiently beside Cole, clearly waiting for the real show to begin. That self-satisfied look on her face filled me with determination. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to give proper credit where it is sorely due, I continued, my voice hardening, to the person whose reprehensible misdeeds and depravity actually sowed the seeds for this conceptual rebirth. You could have heard a pin drop in that silent hall as I paused for maximum dramatic effect. Jamie and Alina exchanged a bewildered look. Ladies and gentlemen, I proclaimed clearly and calmly, let me tell you about the heinous transgressions of my own wretched sister Alina. And with that, a torrent of revelations began spilling forth from my lips. The seduction of Jamie, the bitter jealousy towards me, the callous manipulation of family bonds. My presentation shifted to projecting shocking proof through photos, texts, audio recordings that Cole had diligently compiled. Audible gasps and murmurs of shock echoed from the stunned crowd. Alina's mouth hung open, her face draining of color as the sordid truth unraveled. You bitch! She erupted once the final piece of damning evidence played, causing her voice to overtake the mic. How dare you try to publicly shame and humiliate me? I simply stood calmly, letting her unleash a torrent of outrage that only further condemned her depravity in the eyes of the horrified attendees. Jamie beside her looked like a cornered animal. With one icy glare of contempt, I knew I had accomplished my objective. Alina's viperous fangs were fully extended, and I had the antidote to permanently neuter her poisonous ways. As security rushed in to subdue her, Cole took the stage, his voice booming with authority. Alina Merriweather, you are hereby being charged with defamation of character, financial fraud, emotional duress, and a menagerie of other offenses against your own flesh and blood. The rest was a blissful blur. In one fell swoop, I had ripped away the veil of deception Alina had hidden behind for far too long. This was her undoing, televised to the entire creative community. There would be no recovering from such a merciless public dismantling of her true nature. At long last, my tormentor had been disarmed and brought to justice. As they led her away in humiliated hysterics, I savored that gratifying realization. Revenge really was a dish best served utterly, shockingly cold. The aftermath of my public takedown of Alina at the gala was swift and severe. In the days that followed, a veritable firestorm erupted across social media and the creative industry. Influential designers, artists, and peers I had looked up to for years took to their platforms to excoriate Alina's abhorrent actions and deceitful behavior. The vitriol was scalding, emboldened by the undeniable proof I had showcased. Jamie, clearly expecting to slink away from the carnage unscathed, instead found himself just as vilified. People couldn't fathom how he could betray me in such a craven manner with my own flesh and blood. What separation was too low to stoop? As for Alina, well, let's just say her phone kept ringing with notifications of friends, colleagues, and employers alike distancing themselves at light speed. Her vain pursuit of social status and prestige spectacularly imploded in her face. I watched it all unfold like a solemn observer, sipping coffee in my apartment with Cole's reassuring presence beside me. He squeezed my hand as each fresh wave of backlash rippled outwards. "No one can refute the truth of what you exposed," he said quietly. "The whole world can see Alina for the toxic, soulless person she truly is." I released a deep, cathartic sigh, feeling lighter than I had in what felt like an eternity. All this time spent suffocating under her manipulative grip, and now she's the one reaping the total alienation she deserves. A slight smile played across Cole's lips. That's not all the reaping she has in store. A few days later, Alina appeared at my apartment, her disgraceful fall from grace punctuated by haggard eyes and disheveled hair. The slightest swell of her belly served as a malignant reminder of her cardinal sin against me. "Happy now?" She spat before I could utter a word. "You've completely devastated my life and career, all for some pathetic bid at revenge." I rose calmly from the couch, straightening my spine to face her. "I should have done this a hell of a lot sooner. You brought this on yourself with your repugnant actions and inability to feel any shred of remorse." Alina opened her mouth to retort, but Cole cut her off as he emerged from the hallway, briefcase in hand. "I wouldn't attempt to plead any sort of defense if I were you," he stated flatly. "Your endless litany of offenses is too extensive to dismiss." Alina's eyes widened in sudden apprehension as Cole snapped open the briefcase, shuffling through a stack of folders and documents inside. "What are you talking about?" she demanded in a wavering voice. "Oh, did Brenna conveniently leave out the minor matter of the criminal proceedings we've initiated?" Cole replied with a sardonic grin. "Because in addition to the severe professional and societal fallout, you're also being pursued legally for your misdeeds." With deft precision, Cole began reciting an exhaustive list of charges. Financial fraud, defamation of character, emotional distress, harassment. The sheer number was dizzying. For each transgression, he brandished documented evidence in the form of bank statements, email trails, even voice recordings of her vindictive ravings. Throughout the surgical dressing down, Alina's countenance progressively drained of its former arrogant bluster. By the time Cole reached the end, her lower lip trembled and eyes glistened with impotent rage. "You can't be serious? Over what, some juvenile sisterly feuding?" Cole's expression hardened like steel. "Over you inflicting permanent psychological devastation through repeated, calculated abuses towards your own family. Quite serious charges, I'd say." Alina said nothing, her mouth working soundlessly as the gravity of her predicament crashed down upon her. In a twisted way, I almost pitied the sniveling state she now found herself reduced to. The mighty really had fallen. "Get out of my home," I said in a toneless murmur. "I never want to see your wretched face again after what you've put me through." With that parting shot, Alina seemed to dissolve into a pathetic puddle of self-loathing and humiliation. She skulked from my apartment without another word, having no fight or survival instinct left after her vile soul had been extracted so ruthlessly. I turned and embraced Cole, nestling into the crook of his strong shoulder as the door clicked shut behind Alina's exit. At long last, the demon had been fully, permanently exorcised. I could breathe freely again, without her cancerous presence polluting my existence. As a new dawn rose, I reveled in the first day of reclaiming my life wholly on my own terms. Revenge could never be sweeter than this long-coveted liberation. With Alina forcibly extricated from my life, the world suddenly seemed brighter, the air crisper. Like a cancer in remission, the toxic malignancy that was my sister had been cut out, allowing healing to finally take root. In the weeks that followed her shameful departure, the fallout from my exposé at the gala continued rippling outwards in destructive waves. Alina found herself persona non grata in every professional circle, her reputation irreparably sullied. She was terminated from her posh marketing job after a tidal wave of outraged emails and calls overwhelmed the company's HR department. Self-inflicted pariah status ensured she was blacklisted from any other opportunities in the future. The legal ramifications were even more severe. I watched with a satisfied smirk as Alina shuffled into the courthouse for her first hearing, wearing an oversized coat to conceal her swollen pregnancy frame. The once radiant beauty had withered into a haggard, downtrodden shadow. Cole delivered an impassioned prosecution statement, methodically presenting all the evidence of his emotional abuse, financial misdeeds, and malicious actions compiled against me over the years. Her public defender could only sit mutely as he was buried under the overwhelming mountain of proof. Due to the severity and extent of these calculated offenses perpetrated by the defendant, we are seeking maximum punitive damages be awarded to the victim, Miss Brenna Wilkins, Cole proclaimed, shooting me a subtle wink of encouragement. I wasn't primarily concerned with monetary restitution. No amount could undo the trauma and gaslighting Alina had inflicted upon me. But I reveled in her ashen, defeated expression as the judges sworn her guilty on every count, saddling her with fines, community service obligations, and potential jail time. The ultimate insult was she wouldn't even be able to fall back on her false public relations skills in the future to salvage any sort of career resurrection. I had ensured her toxic reputation would forever supersede any professional competence. As the sentencing concluded, and bailiffs escorted Alina from the room in handcuffs, she finally met my eyes. The hollow, vitriolic glare she shot my way spoke volumes about the molten core of hatred still burning within her shriveled husk. A final burst of venom for the traitorous sister who orchestrated her downfall. I simply watched stoically, unmoved and unaffected by her empty, impotent rage. She had nobody to blame but herself for the miserable pit into which she now festered. I found it profoundly symbolic justice that she would likely give birth to her child under the oppressive weight of incarceration. That night, Cole took me out for a celebratory dinner at an upscale restaurant, treating me to expensive wine and desserts. As we polished off the last morsels, I caught him giving me an adoring look across the table. "What?" I asked with a slight blush at his tender gaze. "I'm just thinking about how far you've come," he replied meaningfully. "From the broken, emotionally battered person you were when we first met, to this brilliant, confident phoenix reborn from the ashes of your past traumas. You're a true inspiration, Brenna." I felt a lump catch in my throat at his heartfelt words. Cole had stood resolution at my side through all the turmoil, his solidity and compassion giving me the strength to persevere. He quite literally helped me take back my life. Without overthinking it, I reached across the table and took his hand, giving it an affectionate squeeze. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," I said softly. "You saw me at my lowest and darkest points, and still chose to believe in me and put that monster in her place. I'll never be able to repay that debt." Cole's thumb traced soothing circles over my knuckles as he gazed warmly into my eyes. "Just promise me one thing, that you'll leave the past in the past. Let the hurt and anger go, and only allow positive growth from this point forward." I felt a solitary tear of release trickle down my cheek as I gave a firm nod, absorbing the depth of his caring counsel. For far too long, Alina's toxic legacy had weighed me down and inhibited me from true self-actualization. It was finally time to shed that heavy, corroded chain forever. "You have my word," I replied, returning Cole's tender smile. With him by my side, I knew there was nothing but bright possibilities ahead. A lifetime's worth of potential awaited me, unburdened by the poisonous shackles of my own flesh and blood. For the first time in forever, I could breathe freely and choose my own destiny. Karma had ultimately had its karmic reckoning, delivering me from the torturous thrall of evil that was my sister. Moving forward, I would embrace hope, optimism, and the inner fortitude to never let such a cancerous force diminish my spirit again. A new chapter was finally free to begin.